new saw blade finally came in. This is a Timberwolf bandsaw blade, and it seemed to do the trick. I was able to cut the rest of these boards really easily, and I have now run them through the planer. And they're nice and flat, and they're rather thin. So my next task is to go ahead and use the table saw to make them 4.5 inches wide, which is the width of the tabletop, and that way they'll match perfectly. I've laid the boards on top of the bench, and they're the same exact thickness, and what we're looking at is the fact that they are going to be book matched. So what I'm going to have to do is figure out exactly how far to each side I need to cut these boards to length so that the book matches still match up. I don't have a whole lot of room to play with. Now you can see here there's a good many bug holes, wormholes in it, but it is a workbench, so that's okay. So the board overhangs a little bit, so that gives me a little room to work with. When I cut these to length, I'm going to set the saw blade to a 45-degree angle, and that way I won't have a butt joint, and it'll have more area for the glue to adhere to both boards. I measured in 1/2 inch from the end of the board, and I'm going to be undercutting this board. To make sure that it's an absolutely accurate cut, I've clamped another board on top of it to hold it steady in place and flush against the top surface of the saw. To do that, I had to add a clamp, and to do that, I had to raise the saw up a little bit higher so I had room to add that clamp. So now you can see how nicely those are going to book match together in the center of the workbench. And you can see there the 45-degree angle cut. I'm using a clamp to hold a board to the bottom of the bench, and that's going to keep this outside rail nice and flush with the bottom while I'm gluing it up. I'm going to glue both sides at the same time, but only one of the boards from each side. And I'm doing that because what I'm looking for is to have this board right here be able to wedge the other board in. So if it's already nice and tight and glued, I should be able to push and jam that board in there and have an extremely nice tight joint.
This is the first time I've used this roller for the glue. It's a Rockler roller. I thought it would do a nice job of being nice and even, but maybe I just need more practice. But I went ahead and switched over to the silicone spreader, which I found I could get it into the grooves of the wood a lot better than just that roller. It's really important that every little nook and cranny has glue in it. Now here I'm sliding it in between those clamps I'd put on the bench, and that makes sure that it's resting right even and flush with the bottom of the bench. Same thing on the other side. I don't really care about how flush it is with the top of the bench yet because I haven't flattened that yet. And now I'm using my brand new clamps, which are really nice. Of course, I set the length of those clamps before I went through this whole process so I could do this as quickly as possible. I'm able to use some shorter clamps here in the tool well, which is also kind of nice, so I could pretty much use everything. Now that the clamps are evenly distributed along the top, I'm now adding clamps to the bottom to make sure that the wood is nice and seated against the sides completely. With the clamps on the bottom nice and tight, I'm going back to the top and adding more bar clamps. I really want the edge of this piece of wood to be flush up against the side of the bench. Now I'm adding bar clamps that have a wider reach that can get to the center of the board. I really need the entire board to have contact with the sides of the bench. Here you can see just how much farther it can reach.
The glue has dried and I've taken all of the clamps off. So what we're going to be looking at right here is the seam where the two boards meet, where they're book matched. And I think that turned out pretty well. I think when that is sanded down, you'll see it, but it's not going to be too bad. You can see there's a lot of glue that penetrated the wood where all those bug holes are. And that's okay. I'll just have to scrape those out and sand them down. So all in all, I'm rather pleased with the outcome. I'm now going to cut off the ends because they're kind of protruding here and they're kind of sharp and jagged. And then I think the next step is going to be to actually flatten the whole top of the bench together.
As always, thanks for watching, and please check out these other YouTube channels.